What's going on, everybody? Welcome to MLB. We'll call it Live Before Lock. We'll pseudo deeper dive. It's whatever we want it to be. It doesn't matter. Just watch the show. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Terry McBride. We are here to break down this 5-game MLB slate. Lots to talk about, though. Kind of unique. We do have the Outlier Cores game. But before we do anything, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. That helps us out a ton. And shout out to Jock Market for being the presenting sponsor of this show. We'll touch on them in a little bit, but first, let's start here. Terry, how are you?
Doing good, man. It's been a productive day. We've got our B-League. We've got both the in-house fantasy drafts later on for the football season. The B-League that I'm in, that I'm the commish of, goes a little bit later. I think we've got a show around the A-League draft, so that'll be a lot of fun. So getting into fantasy football season, and just been kind of looking forward to doing this show today and talking about this weird baseball slate that we've got. I think this is going to be at least interesting, maybe fun. Who knows? Hopefully productive and profitable.
It is a fairly bizarre slate, given how much the Rockies and Braves are breaking free from the pack from a run total perspective. Something that I do not agree with as of right now, but we're going to get there in a while. We've got 5 games to break down. We could talk. We'll see how much time we have at the end. We could talk about it positionally. I promise you, everybody, we will have dong picks. I know people are going to be looking for them. That will happen. We'll probably have some time to take some questions. We don't have to go too crazy here. We got all the time in the world.
Yeah,
I'm gonna fix this problem once and for all here.
Oh, I mean, you were doing stuff there. I'm realizing that I'm talking
to you right now.
Sounds good.
Okay. It won't happen again. I know why it happens.
I was relying on your hand signals, Jordan. I don't know.
I know why it happens. Okay. I know where the fix is, and I can stop it from ever having to get to that point. I just prefer not to. So now, for some reason, look, I have no Bluetooth operationally right now. My mic's doing this weird thing. It's a bad day for my technology. I think what it's telling me is I need to buy a new desktop. I think that's where I'm at now.
I've actually been meaning to do that.
I bought
my laptop's no good for streaming. If I have to host something, it just doesn't work.
I bought this in either late 2017 or early 2018. I hope I'm getting that right. I bought it right before I started at Awesemo via YouTube tips and selling projections and stuff right before I came over here. I got an actual streaming PC. So I think it's just sort of on its last legs because it's basically been on for 4 years straight of me using it nonstop. So maybe I just need some new tech.
Yeah. Look, computer time. I mean, that thing's ancient at this point anyway. Those things go, that's obsolete 6 months after you buy it. And So juice up those processors. Jordan's writing all this down. These are production expenses at this point, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's what? I throw 0.5 ETH at the dumbest stuff in the world right now. I might as well just buy a $2,000 computer that's dope. At least I'll get some utility out of it for a while.
Yeah, it seems worth it. Maybe you can even run some stuff in there and mine some coin. Who knows?
There we go. Double dipping.
All kinds of shit going on. Yeah.
All right. So we got an ownership update 2 minutes ago. I'm going to grab that first.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab the results of the crunch that I started running as we started this show. And then you and I can break down this 5-gamer. What do you say?
Sounds like a plan. Let me grab that ownership as well. I'm looking forward to this one. There's some funky, interesting numbers in this ownership all day long. So very curious.
Right. Bang. I got out. Something's wrong here. Show. Yeah, there we go. I always forget to click the show relief pitchers, show bench buttons.
Oh, yeah.
Export the player list.
Yeah, not the biggest fan in general of those. I like the control that we can exert over all different aspects of Fantasy Cruncher now. Although I do still wish we could change the lineup situations individually like they allow for hockey lines.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah, that's something that I still struggle with remembering. All right, I got to click that button, take guys out, put guys in, or if I want everybody to display. So yeah, that's a little challenging.
I want those buttons always checked. I want randomness always checked. I want an upload and remove previous projections button. So instead of me having to clear old projections from the actions button and then upload my new stuff, I want a button that just says clear everything that existed and then upload. So
yeah, like replace with kind of.
I don't know why I'm talking about it like this. I can just message Dave.
yeah, he's in that channel.
Oh, speaking of, since we have time, it's not all that interesting. For some reason, I was poking around my Gmail. This was like probably a week ago. Oh, whenever they made this, they made like a G chat switch. And I looked in my chats and realized that I have a thread in my G chats. I have like 8 of them total. One of them is Dave and I talking about FC and like the things that exist for it. If I'm going to like do any content from February of 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
Old school. Man,
yeah.
I mean, that puts you like fairly early adopter in just using the app at all, let alone with like,
I was
our company or any of that stuff.
As much as I could say that I was day one, I was day one because he had been posting it into the DFS subreddit. So I saw it from the jump.
Right. Well, I remember when we first connected, when you started working here, I guess was probably around the time you had access to the beta and things like that. And it was just like, wow, look at these features that Josh has that are coming soon. It was really cool to see that stuff. So yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, this goes all the way back to 2014. I'm just scrolling in it now. I have an affiliate code for the site. There is one person still that used my affiliate code from 2015 that still has that membership.
What happened to all the rest of them?
They fell off,
petered out, died on the vine, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Yep. They probably stopped following all your projections and everything. So that's what happened.
They're probably broke now too.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, let's dive into this bad boy. We're kicking it off. Mets and Marlins, 3.9 run implied total for the Mets, 3.1 for the Marlins. Carlos Carrasco and Sandy Alcantara, not who I was expecting it to be earlier this morning. And that really changes the pitching landscape at least a little bit. We've got Carlos Carrasco projected for 56% ownership on DraftKings, 42 on FanDuel. We've got Sandy Alcantara at 32% ownership on DraftKings. He is 8,200 and at just 6% on FanDuel because he's 10,500. The prices here are a little bit wacky. Let's talk through it, though. How are you feeling about Carrasco?
I think he's probably still the strongest upside pitcher on the slate, the pitcher who's in the best situation going up against a team that's really one of the lousier offenses in this split and in general in baseball. Plenty of strikeouts here for him. I can't get away from the idea that that's just way too much ownership to put on Carlos Carrasco's plate. And I kind of go down the avenue of thinking of just Carlos Carrasco is a very good pitcher. Over the last few years, he was in the 28 to 29% strikeout range over, in and out of baseball with various injuries, with his illness and everything. But he is a very good pitcher. But within that, he's never been this elite Max Scherzer type who's just mowing guys down constantly. He's always been a guy who's put guys on base. He's had a few short sample seasons where he struggled with home runs. There have been other things going on in those years, but there are at least some reasons to think that this isn't necessarily a spot where you want to go along with just half the field without thinking about it and walk down that path. I think it totally warrants a lot of ownership, particularly the broken price on FanDuel at 6,800 is just bananas. So yeah, it warrants a ton of ownership. It's just worthy of considering what else am I putting with it? How am I getting it all different? If you're putting him with Coors Field, congratulations on making the same lineup that 6,000 other people are going to have in that tournament. It's very difficult.
I haven't looked at any other projections. I haven't even looked at our own for FanDuel. I have Carlos Carrasco as the highest projected pitcher today, and he's 6,800 on FanDuel.
Same.
It's just utterly broken. Looks great. I like him on the DraftKings side. He showed up in my sim a little bit ahead of the ownership, so I expect to be just fully neutral there. And Alcantara, I have slightly lower than his current ownership. Showed up in 24%. We got him at 32. So nothing that I'm reading into all that much. As far as I'm concerned, both of these guys are about properly owned. Earlier in the day, I was a little bit less interested in the Mets. Now that changes a bit with Alcantara pulling so much ownership. I do believe we get a little bit of leverage there. But in terms of offense, I'm a little lower on this game than the public line is. I've got the Mets 8th. I've got the Marlins 10th. I think the Mets are a little bit under-owned, and you do get that benefit of having Sandy in 30% of lineups, but neither one of these options to me are prime spots for offense. Are you looking at the Mets or the Marlins?
Not really. I agree with that. There's no real reason to go to bats in what is the best pitching spot of the day and the teams that the guys that you kind of are going to be around there, outside of the fact that it's the best pitching spot of the day and you can attack all that ownership. So I'm not really intrigued by the teams themselves, but I'm sort of intrigued by the situation across sites where on the FanDuel slate, I don't think you need to go to the Mets because Sandy's only going to be owned at that 6% mark or thereabouts, single digits, because he's so expensive. I'm more intrigued by Sandy in that situation. But on DraftKings, to your point, now we can go to the Mets, the much better of these two teams, going up against comparable pitching. I think it becomes a much more interesting situation for the Mets now with nobody really on them and with a significant amount of popularity on Sandy Alcantara. Earlier in the day, when I didn't think that was going to be the case as far as that pitching situation, even though it was maybe a better situation from the Mets bats, you weren't really going after very much there in terms of the leverage. So I think it got more interesting on the DK slate. And then on the FanDuel slate, I think the situation's kind of reversed. I think there's an argument to be made, as bad as they are, to at least considering some shares of some of these Marlins, given they're all, for the most part, outside of Jazz Chisholm and, on DK, a couple of these other guys are in the very low single digits, but most of these guys across both sites are owned at like 1%. It's easy enough to go over the field on those guys and attack a little bit of that Carrasco ownership. And given what I was saying before about putting some guys on base, I think there's some upside in doing that for the FanDuel slate. So it's just reverse situations, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if Carrasco is going to be in 42% of all of the lineups that are made on FanDuel, by default, you've got a case for the Marlins. You don't have to go too crazy, because I think the more likely scenario is Carrasco just doesn't provide you the score that is absolutely necessary, and a different stack is the primary. But at the same time, you can put yourself in a really nice situation if Carrasco fully ejects right out of the gate. And this isn't in Miami, so it's much more likely to happen in New York than it would have been if this game was flip-flopped in location. Also, the total for this game would be staggeringly low. Do you have a favorite bat in this game?
Leaving out like Pete Alonso, who has the highest home run total in this game on the Mets, highest home run total in the game across the board. Jesus Aguilar, the highest home run total in my model on the Marlins side of things. I think just looking at the Marlins, since I was talking about them a little bit and what I would do considering throwing bats at Carlos Carrasco, I think Jesus Sanchez is interesting on the left side of the plate. Jazz Chisholm is getting a little bit of ownership on the FanDuel side of things, but those are two guys that I'm kind of intrigued by around the sides of Aguilar's bat. And then going through the rest of that lineup, it's not a good lineup. It's not a good offense, but there's a few interesting individuals with some kind of upside. I think Isan Diaz on the left side of the plate is interesting later in that lineup, and there's going to be nobody on him for 2,200 on FanDuel, 2,300 on DK. So if you're going to Marlins, I would consider him. He's kind of the guy I'm going to throw into the mix as the oddball here.
God, this spreadsheet is being
better
so
bad
bad for me.
Better bat for Isan Diaz than he's shown, in my opinion.
He's better than 2,300 and 2,200.
Yeah.
That I can give you.
Yeah, a little bit. All right, let's put some numbers on it. And 435 AAA plate appearances in 2019. He went 305, 395, 578, created runs 32% better than average, had a 273 ISO, walked 11.3% of the time while striking out 22.1% of the time, hit 26 home runs, stole 5 bases. AAA numbers, but still a relevant enough ball player, knows how to make quality contacts. So hasn't fully translated to the majors, but every now and then he pops. If we're looking for oddballs on a short slate with a weird team to be rostering, he's a consideration for me.
Just for the record, I have the Mets third in leverage. That's not factoring in Alcantara's ownership. So I'm going to expect to get to the Mets a little bit today. I'm actually going to be playing a little bit more than I normally do because I'm not on a proper live before lock. It's very nice.
There you go.
I have been avoiding it largely just because it's an absolute chore to try to host the show and run it all the way up to lock. But I get a free hour. So yay me. Kudos to the college football show coming up after this, which we will talk about in a little bit. I don't have anything else for Mets and Marlins. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we want to talk Mets, just since we've got a little time, there are much better bats in that lineup that are going off at low ownership. I mentioned Alonso. Michael Conforto has been underperforming for the entire season, but that's why his price is at 2,500 on FanDuel, 32 on DK, and nobody's going to him. Javi Baez hitting later in the lineup. Jeff McNeil's like a hit tool guy, but he's going to be unowned later in the lineup. You get multi-position out of both of those guys on both sites. There's just interesting pieces to move around that team. So I do like the ability to roster them. And something I noticed just clicking around, I think it's a little bit more relevant on the FanDuel slate. There's a little bit of a lack of viable shortstop options on this slate, and it's kind of forcing teams to come together in interesting ways, or at least some of the go-to teams. So given the multi-position eligibility of the Mets, with a couple guys with, one guy, Johnny VR, up at the top with 3-position eligibility, and then a few guys with multi-position, and then a few guys on DK with multi-position. I think they're an interesting offense to go to just for the ability to put different kinds of constructions together. So they're going to be relevant one way or another.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the shortstop ownership now on FanDuel. Yeah, we're very concentrated at the top. That's pretty wild. Yeah, like I said, the Mets leverage is really appealing to me on DraftKings at this point, given that Alcantara is at 30%. And I think that they're individually under-owned. So I'm going to prioritize getting to a couple extra Met stacks. Just doesn't feel like a great spot, but that's not at all what I'm looking for either. I need public data, and that's what's going to drive my stuff. Rays and Red Sox.
Get away from that. Get away from those field numbers on a slate of this size. Anytime you can buy into just getting away from the public with only 5 games to choose from, and everybody's just going to the same spots. I think it's an interesting slate just from that perspective. Like this next game that we're about to talk about, the hitting is wide open here, and these are two of the best offenses in baseball. Yeah,
here it comes. Rays and Red Sox, 4.2 run implied total for the Rays, 3.3 for the Sox. Shane McClanahan and Eduardo Rodriguez. McClanahan at 34% ownership on DK. I think that's right. 17% for Erod. I think that's a little bit low. On the FanDuel side, we've got McClanahan at 16%, Erod at 12%. I think both of those numbers are pretty spot on. How are you managing the pitching in this one?
Yeah, I like the spot for Erod here. It's not, you don't ever really want to throw a pitcher into Tampa Bay if you can avoid it. They're a good offense in general, but they're a lot better on the other side of splits. Against lefties, 3.55 home run rate, 164 ISO, both around the middle of the league, slightly below, and a 24.3% strikeout rate, which is in the bottom third of the league. They create runs 6% better than average for the active roster for the year in the split. So they're still a good, productive offense, but the power is a lot less than it is. They've got a 206 ISO and a 4.7% home run rate against righties. So they're just very different and a very different team on the other side of splits. They strike out against both hands, but they're a little bit more safe this way. So I like the spot for Erod. He's been pitching better than it seems like all season long. On the back of his baseball card, he's a 5-something ERA, but a 3.49 xFIP. He's got a 27.5% strikeout rate. A lot of good indicators. It was a 358, I want to say, batting average on balls in play against. So a lot of hits, a lot of happenstance that have created earned runs against him this year. But overall, he's been strong throughout the season. He's at a 34.9% hard hit rate for the year and only 86.9 mile an hour average exit velo with a 7.3% barrel rate. So he's reasonably good at limiting quality contact. I think he's got a good chance of at least getting through this lineup a couple times clean, and there's plenty of strikeouts here for him. So I agree with you. I think he's under-owned.
That makes me feel pretty good. I'm excited to get to him, particularly on DK. I think that 9K price tag works. I don't have much to say about McClanahan. Like, this isn't the normal Red Sox lineup. The bottom of it is kind of cheeks. I have it relatively neutral. There's a reason you see them with a 3.3 run implied total. I think McClanahan is priced about where he should be. I think he's owned right where he should be. I don't have any hot takes any further for McClanahan. Are you paying all the way up? Well, not all the way up for him on FanDuel. He's second thanks to Sandy, but would you be paying all the way up for him on DraftKings?
I think he's at least relevant, but this is, again, this Boston team, even the diminished version of it, the top end of this lineup is still really solid. It has a lot of power upside. So I get concerned about throwing any kind of pitching into it. And McClanahan, youngish kind of a guy, 100 in the third innings on the season with 20 in 20 starts, solid 27.7% strikeout rate, excellent 3.24 xFIP. Starts to get a little clunkier on the 129 whip, but he's very, very good at inducing swinging strikes at 14.9%. Where I get concerned about this top end of the Red Sox is around his barrel rate, his contact profile. 9.9% barrel rate for the year, 44.5% hard hit, 91.3 mile an hour average exit velo. He keeps the ball down, 8.7 degree average launch angle. That's what saves him on the contact stuff. But if he makes a mistake against hitters like the guys at the top of this lineup, like a JD Martinez, a Hunter Renfroe, even Kyle Schwarber, lefty, I'm not concerned about. Bobby Dahlbeck and his ridiculous power. There's a lot of home run upside. There's a massive ISO at the top of this lineup. Top 5 hitters in the Boston lineup have an average ISO for the season of 256. That's bananas. So there's so much power, even without Xander Bogaerts up there, even with the diminished version. I get a little concerned about paying full freight or more than what I think Shane McClanahan's probably worth, while also taking on that much ownership. If McClanahan was in this spot at 5% ownership on the FanDuel slate, I think it's a lot more interesting. If he was at even around 20% ownership on the DK slate, I think he's a lot more interesting. To me, it's a spot where I just want to get away from that price and get away from that much of the field against the lineup that I still respect here.
The bigger question then is, how do you want to manage the bats? I have the Rays 7th, but 2nd overall in leverage, also not taking into account that Erod is getting any ownership. I have the Red Sox 9th. They are 5th in leverage, just slightly underowned, not taking into account that Shane McClanahan is in a third of the lineups. How do you want to balance this? Because we've got a great Rays offense. We've got a solid Red Sox offense, certainly loaded at the top side. We've got ownership coming in on both sides to pitching. Are you going to just all of this game?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a firm both sides of this one, right? For all the not wanting necessarily to go out of my way for McClanahan, I would absolutely take shares. I would just aim to be, if the field's at 16% when we lock, if I'm at half that, if I'm at 8, 10%, I'm fine with that. And I'm happy with that. If I'm choosing up sides, there's probably more quality. Well, I don't know if I'm actually going to go that way. I'm going to go with the Red Sox side still, and I'm just focusing on those top 5 hitters. Anytime I can get those top 5 Red Sox at this kind of ownership, we're talking low single digits for everybody in the lineup, I'm willing to do it. It's just another one of those situations like we've talked all year long. Go to good bats when they're under owned. We know that these top 5, I just read off the power numbers before. We can talk in terms of run creation. That same top 5, average WRC plus for the season, 25% better than average. So those 5 guys create runs 25% better than any other average 5 guys in the league. So I kind of like that spot, although I think there's a ton of talent in the Rays lineup, and you can make similar arguments there. The numbers are just a little bit lesser. We've got their issues going up against lefty pitching, and I guess I think just a little bit more of Erod as a pitcher probably than I do McClanahan here. So I think that would shy me away from the Rays bats a little bit more, but it's firmly all 4 sides of this one.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I think you kind of need to have every piece of this one if you're a 150 maxer. And if you're not, you're probably looking at pitching before you're looking at hitting. Although there are like a Rosarena right now, 4,500 on DraftKings, 3,600 on FanDuel, not pulling nearly as much ownership as I think he should, given the spot at the top of the order. He would be my priority coming out of either side of this. Fascinating game for a 5-game slate.
Yeah, absolutely. To see these two teams going off on a slate of this size with nobody really focused on their offenses is a little bit odd. It makes sense given the way that this slate falls. It makes it a really, really intriguing slate. And you just know that it's going to be a Jack Lopez, Jonathan Aruz kind of night. Those 2 guys will score 40 points off the back end of the Sox lineup with 0.1% of everybody on them. But as far as hitters go, I'm definitely not sleeping on Mike Zunino down toward the bottom of that lineup against the lefty. I'll take Mike Zunino any day when he's in the lineup, but particularly only 2% owned where you need catchers on the DK slate, 1% owned for 3,400 on FanDuel. The guy has, if you ignore qualifications, because he's only got 307 plate appearances when other guys have over 500 at this point, he leads the league by a lot with a 26.3% barrel rate on the season. Skipping over other unqualified guys with only a handful of plate appearances, we get to Shohei Ohtani, who everybody's familiar with. He's at a 23.8% barrel rate for the season. So we're talking about a guy who barrels the baseball on a significantly more regular basis than Ohtani. He's got a 48.7% hard hit percentage on the year, 27 home runs in 307 plate appearances, a 343 ISO for Mike Zunino. Love that guy. Good chances to hit a home run here.
Whew, I got a little nervous. I was having some stack crunch issues.
Oh, I couldn't see you there because I didn't have the window popped up. So when I stopped talking for a change and then didn't hear anything, I got nervous.
Nah, I clicked crunch and it was like, you are stopped at 9 lineups. I was like, I don't know what I did, but I'm starting from scratch.
Those are brutal messages. At least we're not like 10 minutes before lock, which is usually when I get those messages, and it's just, melts my brain.
Super chat from Jay. Thank you for that one. He says, hi guys. Took down both mini maxes last night and then got slapped in the beanbag on today's day slate. Just showing some love. Good to hear, Jay. I know you're a premium sub, so shout out to seeing that
congrats,
this morning.
He's been killing it with home run
shout out
picks,
to getting slapped in the beanbag for the day slate.
That's what happens when you chase, man. Grab those wins, and I can't help doing stuff like that. I'm the worst at that kind of a thing. Nobody wants my advice in that kind of a aspect of this.
Schedule coming up for the rest of the day. Right after this, 6 to 7, college football live before lock with Ben and Matt Kajeski. You don't want to miss this bad boy. Make sure you're watching the breakfast menu as well. Ben and I gave out some college football bets. And then 7:30 Eastern time on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. It's the Awesemo Fantasy Football Draft. Laffy, Nolan, Ben, Alex, Adam, they're all going to be there. You're not finding me there. I don't do season long. I tapped out. I'm not involved in any of it. I don't want to shame everybody by winning everything. I would win every single league at the same time, but that's just how it's going to end up being. But either way, you guys should be watching the draft. I think it's going to be a good hang, good time. Watch everybody. Say who you think is going to win the league. It'll be good. They'll have a lot of fun going on. I'm definitely going to pop into chat during the draft as well. Plus free content. You're watching an MLB show. You're in luck. MLB top pitchers. We reference it a lot. It is free. Check out the link from Nightbot or just go directly to awesemo.com. Cubs and Pirates. 4.2 run implied total for the Cubs, 3.8 for the Pirates. Keegan Thompson, Mitch Keller. I had the Pirates slightly favored in this game earlier today and bet on it in the morning. Boy, did that line move for me. No longer find the Pirates to be the favorite. Made a bad bet at whatever time in the morning it is that one went in. Either way, Keegan Thompson, 8% owned on DraftKings, 2% on FanDuel. Mitch Keller is 21% owned on DraftKings, 8% on FanDuel. I'm a little lighter on Keller than that, but this is a matchup of two truly awful offenses. It's like the inverse of Rays Red Sox.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one's drawing a lot more public attention with a lot of people are going to these bats. Way worse teams here. But I get it. I mean, there's two terrible pitchers on the mound. Nobody on any of these teams really costs all that much. So it makes sense that they're pulling some DFS ownership. It's just when I was hand building my placeholder lineup before the show, I was just kind of like clicking around between the different matchups in my spreadsheet. And I landed here for a few minutes, just price-based and thinking about what I could put together. And it's just like, do I really want to go out of my way for a lineup of Jason Hayward, Robinson Chirinos, Matt Duffy on the 5, 6, 7, 8 on the Cubs side of things, Jacob Stallings, Wilmer Defoe, Anthony Alford in those spots on the Pirates side? I don't mind the top end of both of these lineups, but that's really where I want to be. And that's where a lot of the people are going to be focused. So to me, it's not a great spot by any means. You're talking about going up against bad offenses. You're talking about very bad pitching. Keller, 19.9% strikeout rate over his 72 innings this season. Keegan Thompson right there, 21.7% over 46 2/3 in 3 starts. So it's just not a good spot for anything. If I'm going to land on something, it would most likely be some of these bats. I don't think I would even get to the field 7-ish% ownership on Keller, 5,700 on FanDuel. I would just prefer to figure out a way to spend the extra couple $100 to get to $6,800 Carlos Carrasco here if I'm going to just pay down. And I don't think you need to pay down. I think there's so many open spots offensively that you don't need $5,700 Mitch Keller here. He's a pitcher who I used to think had a little something, and it's just never come together for him. No. So I don't need him. I don't really need to be going to Keegan Thompson. So for me, it would be about the bats. I just don't really love the situation. So I guess probably around the field, if I come up with that on guys like Colin Moran is somewhat interesting to me. Cole Tucker up top is very, very cheap, somewhat interesting. Brian Reynolds has been very good all year, but he's drawing the most ownership on both sites. I don't love it. What are you doing with the bats? Are you seeing it similarly?
So I have the Pirates 5th, but 8th in leverage. So I'm not loving it. Wilmer Defoe being 22% owned, driving a lot of that. Just not going to have that sort of ownership for me. And given that Keegan Thompson isn't pulling all that much ownership, the Pirates are not going to be a priority for me. I have the Cubs sixth, plus sixth in leverage, and you get Keller at 20% ownership. That starts to be a little bit more interesting to me. It's not going to be a fun time given the bottom of this lineup. It's like a lot of below average guys over and over and over again. But if I'm getting to either side of this, it's probably going to be a little bit more Cubs. I think individually their ownership is slightly too low. And I think the double down effect of having Keller in 1 out of every 5 lineups in your contest will help out a little bit. So the Pirates seem to me like the team that I will most easily get away from.
That makes some sense. I don't mind the idea of attacking that 20% ownership chunk on Mitch Keller. Like I said, I just don't think much of him as a pitcher anymore. To put a few numbers on that part of it, I talk about the BBB minus K metric. That's walk rate plus barrel rate minus strikeout rate. That's showing him as one of the most vulnerable pitchers on the slate for run creation, for sequential hitting purposes. He doesn't strike anybody out at 19.9%. He walks 11.1, allows an 8.3% barrel rate, 49.1% hard hit, 92 mile an hour average exit velo. He's extremely targetable. And you've got at least one good home run hitter in the Cubs lineup in Patrick Wisdom, 54.4% hard hit on the season, 17.4% barrel rate. Those are excellent marks. 25 home runs and 287 plate appearances. That's phenomenal. It's what's around him that's the problem. But yeah, you can string together, I mentioned Jason Hayward in hitters that I don't love. 213, 280, 329 with a 116 ISO this season. Jason Hayward's better than that. So it hasn't really come through. Still a 42.6% hard hit, only barrels the ball 4.2% of the time. That's a little concerning. Matt Duffy, 2% of the time on the barrel rate. Ian Happ is good for barrels. Frank Schwindel's okay for him. So maybe if you're looking for just contact and productive bats, you go to that part of the lineup. But again, that's walking toward the top end of the lineup. So it's kind of obvious and kind of where people are going to be.
2 active promo codes to talk about right now. One, you've heard me talk about a lot. You've probably also heard me on the Draft Wingman videos and the Mock Wingman video. I don't know if that got released yet today, but it got recorded today. Promo code is WR. Get our Awesemo fantasy football draft kit for season long and best ball using that promo code. It's the same projections, tools, and analysis you get for our normal NFL DFS stuff, but you get the Draft Wingman tool. The most valuable thing you're going to find for drafting for best ball and for season long. We get a rankings and stacking guide. You get a trade value chart and so much more. Plus up to a $35 credit for underdog and FFPC leagues. It's 33% off using that promo code WR, which means it's going to cost you less than $10 for everything we have to offer for season long and best ball. Don't sleep on it. If you haven't had your draft yet, just pay for it now. Don't even worry about it. I promise you it's going to help you at your draft. Also, another promo code you should be using, that would be Tailgate. It's college football time. Again, college football live before lock coming up after this. You want to watch it. I think you could probably blindly use Matt's projections right now and do pretty well. It's going to help you out tremendously. Use the promo code Tailgate. Get $10 off your first week of Awesemo Plus college football. That's player projections, ownership, matchup data, and more. This offer is only good through Saturday. So you want to get in quick. Not going to probably be offering up any more deals for college football. So you want to make sure you're grabbing that one using that promo code Tailgate.
Not bad.
Yeah, I had my first, man.
I had my first season-long draft just the other night on Tuesday. It was a live draft. It's my long-standing dynasty league. Or keeper league, I guess. We have weird settings. These guys have been doing it 20-some-odd years. We go to my friend's parents' house every year to do it. Last year, obviously, didn't happen that way. It was all Zoom and everything. So great to be back with everybody. My long-winded point here, if you want to hear just like a chorus of all your friends just saying like, damn it, I was just going to pick that guy. I wanted that guy. Use our Draft Wingman product. That is all I heard all night. It was awesome. Thing helped me tremendously. I was not prepared for this draft in the slightest, and I nailed it. So love the product.
There it is. I couldn't have done it better myself. Royals and Indians. 4.3 run implied total for the Royals, 4.2 for the Indians. Mike Minor and Tristan McKenzie. 28% ownership on DraftKings for Minor, just 11 on FanDuel. And somehow this one got worse, I guess because of Sandy. $9,300 Tristan McKenzie is 3% owned and 1% owned across DK and FanDuel. We had an extended conversation about him earlier today, but we have to start where the ownership is. What are your thoughts on Mike Minor?
Yeah, Mike Minor's going to be on this slate, and you can go to him if you want. He's not the most appealing guy to me in the world. I think I'd rather be on the Indians' bat side of this one. That said, it looks like their ownership has been creeping up slightly throughout the day on at least the key hitters in that lineup. There are some good spots in there, though, so we'll talk them through. But Minor, 147 and 2/3 is unspectacular, 22.8% strikeout rate, 4.34 xFIP. He's very league average-ish. 26.9% CSW is well below average, doesn't throw enough strikes, allows 9.9% barrels, 37.4% hard hit, 16.7 degree average launch angle that starts the trend toward home run trajectory. So not striking out enough, walking a couple too many at 6.6%, allowing all those barrels. He's targetable in the sequential hitting and run creation metric, a little bit better than some of the other guys on this slate, but still super targetable and definitely targetable for some home run upside. Some of that's coming through in the model for the opposing Cleveland team here. So I'll probably be under the field on Minor, I would expect. 11% ownership on FanDuel is not that bad for 8,500, but I just think I'm going to be going elsewhere, and a lot of it for me is probably going to be just waiting down the other side of this game on the mound.
He showed up in 18% of my sims. He's 26% owned. I figure that I'll be in like that 15 to 20% range. Nothing too crazy. I understand why he's getting rostered, but I'm not going to go nuts for it. I did bump up Tristan McKenzie in terms of how long I expect him to be in the game, but at 9,300, I am not expecting to get there. Are you a Tristan McKenzie guy? Because I personally am hoping that he's just awful and I can gloat to Adam tomorrow on the strategy show.
We are going to be on opposite sides of that one, I think, my friend. Given the just overall talent in the kid's arm, the fact that he's one of the higher strikeout rates on the board at 28.5%, I think it's a mistake going up against this team that he's so low owned. The Royals are a league average kind of an offense. They don't strike out that much in this split against right-handed pitching. So that's a little bit concerning when we talk about the available strikeouts for them. But I think in terms of available upside and total lack of ownership, McKenzie's my favorite pitcher on the board. The Royals, I mentioned, very average. They're actually below average in terms of their power and their run creation. 3.10% home run rate in the split, 146 team ISO in the split, WRC plus 12% below average. They do avoid the strikeouts, 21.8%, ranks them fifth best in baseball avoiding strikeouts against right-handed pitching. I'm going to bet on Tristan McKenzie's overall talent and upside here. I'm going to pay the price in terms of his salary, hopefully not in terms of him getting destroyed. The concerning marks that you kind of alluded to, 12.5% walk rate. Ugh, God, atrocious. Still has a 115 whip despite that somehow, so doesn't allow a ton of hits. 4.62 xFIP, though. That becomes concerning when we talk about some of his underlying marks here. 10% barrel rate, 42% hard hit rate, 90.7 mile an hour average exit velo, and a 22.6 degree average launch angle. That is home run trajectory for sure. So it's concerning, but you don't have to go like crazy out of your way to get well over the field on him. I just think it makes sense to load up on this spot, given his overall talent, his strikeout upside, his abilities. You might get nailed, but for tournament plays, I don't think it gets better.
What I think gets better is the bats in this game. Royals, number 3 overall, number 2 in leverage. Indians, number 4 overall, number 1 in leverage. I think both of these teams are dramatically underowned. Cleveland in particular, because of Mike Minor's ownership, is just absolutely amazing to me. You get Minor in a quarter of the lineups on DraftKings. I think they're my number 4 stack just in general. Plus, I think they're underowned there. I'm going to be very heavy on the Cleveland Indians tonight in terms of 5-man stacks. And I'm going to be heavier than the public on the Royals. I wish McKenzie was getting a little bit of ownership. It would make me feel a little bit better. But the Royals, let me look at their top stack odds because I want to talk about it a little bit if it's still what it was earlier today. So top stack odds for Kansas City, 6%. I'm significantly higher here. But ownership share of 9%. Whit Merrifield is getting 23% ownership. Salvador Perez is getting 14%. No one's surprised to see either one of those numbers. And a lot of that is happening because they're second basemen and catchers on a 5-game slate. The rest of this lineup is 7% or below. This is not a heavily owned 5-man stack. I think the top, like the aggregate ownership for the top stacks tool is doing it a little bit of a disservice because even if you just said, okay, well, I guess I'll leave Whit Merrifield off. You're probably one of the few people that are going to have that 5-man stack for the Royals. But even still, leave it on there. Nicky Lopez is hitting second. He's projected for 5% ownership. Like, you can still get there if you need to be. Hunter Dozier's got dual eligibility, is 2,400. He's projected for 6% ownership. This is a unique stack still. Whit Merrifield's ownership is throwing it off a little bit. I want to be on both sides of this game from an offense perspective.
Yeah, I agree. It's another spot to definitely consider both sides of the offenses. We talked about both pitchers. I prefer the McKenzie side of things. With as much as I want to get to extended shares of McKenzie compared to where the field's going to be, I'm definitely going to look to over roster some of these Royals bats on the other side of that, because kind of exactly like you said, and it plays the same for both teams. There are two hitters on which the entire field is focused on both teams on both sides. And those are Jose Ramirez and Franmil Reyes on the other side of this one. A little bit more weight on some guys like Harold Ramirez and Owen Miller on the DK slate. But on FanDuel, it's very, very much similar, where everybody immediately drops into single digits. On the Royals, absolutely. You can get to guys like Nicky Lopez hitting toward the top of the batting order, 18 stolen bases on the year. Doesn't do a lot with the bat in terms of creating power, but definitely correlates well with some of these other hitters. 363 on base percentage with all that speed is perfectly fine. 292 batting average, 363 slugging, 0.072 ISO. So you can see where the power goes, but they make up for it when you're still putting him together with Sal Perez behind him. I don't hate getting to Andrew Benintendi. I think Carlos Santana is a very underrated option on this slate. 2 years ago, Carlos Santana hit 34 home runs, had a 234 ISO on the season. This season, he's at a 141 ISO, only 17 home runs and 541 plate appearances. Has been slumping, but hits from both sides of the plate. We know the power is in that bat, so I don't mind getting there. Back end is a little bit weaker, but you can put these guys together. So, yeah, no problem with stacking them. No problem with stacking the Cleveland side. I wrote them up in my article this afternoon.
I'm actually really excited to start running some crunches. I mean, I have one in the background. Fingers crossed, I guess, that the Braves lineup just doesn't change and I don't have to rerun it again. But I'm excited to bump these Royals and Indians up and get a little bit more. This is going to be my spot.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. There's a lot of power upside in that Cleveland lineup. I think Ahmed Rosario is underrated and coming in under 10%. 289, 329, 426 on the season. 10 home runs, 12 stolen bases. He's a guy who's gone 15 in the majors in his career. Still young kid, kind of just still developing. I think Harold Ramirez is underrated and only costs $2,100 on DK, $2,400 on FanDuel, where he's not getting very much ownership at all. 48% hard hit rate, one of the better marks on the season. 15.1% strikeout rate over his 284 plate appearances. So he's a guy who hits the ball hard, squares it up, and puts it in play constantly. So if you're rostering guys like Jose Ramirez, Franmil Reyes, extend the stack out. Go to a guy like Harold Ramirez. Go to a guy like Yu Chang, who is quietly at a 220 ISO over 173 plate appearances on the season. 7 home runs, 220, 254, 439 triple slash, creates runs 18% worse than average. So not great for sequential hitting and run creation, but has a little bit of sneaky pop. So if you pop him on the back end of a stack that starts up at the top of the lineup, maybe you find that lucky home run that's going to be completely unowned in this lineup. So a lot of different ways to put this team together.
Before we get to the final game, I just took a look. We see 655 concurrent viewers, 96 likes. Not nearly enough. Ooh. This is the only show. We got to run this number up. 150. At this moment, hit that like button if you haven't done it already. Needs to happen. If I see one more, this is what this guy has done in 11 games. I'm dropping the get out of here for 5 minutes link. I can't take it anymore. The incompetence in this chat is staggering right now. Good Lord.
Yeah, guys, get the short sample stuff out of your head. Baseball takes so long to normalize. There's a reason that all of our models are using data. There's a reason I was just referencing home runs from 2 years ago. I mean, these guys you have to consider 1,000+ plate appearances for a lot of offensive stats to normalize. Baseball needs so much data. A week of baseball means nothing, literally nothing.
But he's got a 250 weighted runs created plus, and his BABIP is normal. It's not even luck. He's the best hitter that's ever existed now. 150% above average. Should have seen it coming. Ride that heater, man. I
don't even know what we're talking about, but I can't wait for him to get paid by my Yankees. Best player of all time, obviously.
Yu Chang, who's got a projected 81 WRC plus in Steamer. By the way, going to be way over the field on him because he shouldn't be 2% owned. But it's not because he played well for the past 10 calendar days.
Yeah, no, not so much at all. We want to look at extended samples as much as possible. And nobody's saying that he's, nobody on this show anyway is saying that he's an amazing player, that he's definitely going to succeed, that he's one of the better players on the slate. It's about the situation. It's about the sneaky productivity that you can find on a guy who's going to be under-owned and costs you nothing to build into a stack like that. So, yeah,
no, he's going to be a
baseball and there's
250
DFS.
weighted runs created plus guy for the rest of his career. I assume that whatever he's done in 10 games, that would just continue. We don't worry about regression around here. We care about small samples and ridiculous data.
You are who your numbers say you are this week.
He's like Barry Bonds times 50, obviously.
Yeah, they should just walk him every time he comes up to the plate for the rest of his life.
I know. How's he going to score enough fantasy points if they just put him on free pass, calling for it immediately when he gets in the box? Somebody should let the Royals know. They got to change their managing strategy up tonight.
Somebody should probably let Cleveland know too.
Incredible that such a masher is hitting sixth today for Cleveland.
And costs, a couple $100 above the dead minimum.
Yeah.
And most people probably couldn't pick him out of a lineup. Yeah.
Could you imagine if you got Barry Bonds at the peak of it all, at just a crisp 2,600 on DraftKings, 2,400 on FanDuel? Whew, lock button. Should be in every cash lineup, apparently. 5.9 run implied total for the Rockies. 7 for the Braves. 7, I said. Chichi Gonzalez, who really needs to update his resume. Tuki Toussaint going for the Braves. I can't really advocate for Chichi Gonzalez today. I guess there's something to be said for facing a team that's getting 40% of the ownership, but do you want to get to Toussaint? Because that's the only actual question I could ask you pitching wise.
I don't think so. I tend not to play Coors Field in a lot of different situations. I usually, if I'm going to go to a pitcher, it's going to be one of the Rockies pitchers when it's one of the good ones at home, specifically Herman Marquez. There's not a lot of other pitchers I really trust. I'll go to an ace caliber pitcher if he's under-owned. Tuki Toussaint is none of these things. He's a young pitcher, 24.1% strikeout rate over 40 innings. He's a high pedigree kid, a well-regarded prospect, but it's not entirely there yet. 4.22 xFIP is fine for a kid to, just kind of figuring things out. 7.5% barrel rate. I get concerned about anybody giving up a 47.7% hard hit rate for his season at Coors Field. 91.7 mile an hour average exit velo. That gets a little concerning in the big ballpark here. So I just don't want any part of either one of these pitchers. I get the idea of going to somebody low owned. Toussaint does have a little bit of strikeout acumen, does have some upside. The Rockies are terrible against right-handed pitching. They're terrible in general, but not so much at home, not so much in this ballpark. The run total is, I agree, it's probably too high, but it's inflated for a reason. It's at one point in the day, at least, was 6 runs higher than the run total in the Mets game in this ballpark. So the delta between that game and this game was the second highest implied total on the entire board, basically, if you wanted to break it down that way. So the ability to fit an entire other game between this one and the other teams, it just makes me kind of want to stay away from a lot of this. I get how over-owned and why both of these offenses are. But even with that, I don't want to go to either of these pitchers. Chichi, 13.2% strikeout rate over 94 2/3 this year. Most targetable pitcher on the slate in terms of the barrels and the walks metric. 44.3% hard hit. Yeah, there's no reason to go to these pitchers.
I'm going to have a little bit of Tukey at no ownership, mostly because of the Rockies' current ownership. And when I say a little, I'm talking like 5 to 10%. Nothing that's going to be really changing my day. Because when he's good, he's good. He also has the ability to press the eject button pretty quickly here. In particular, for a Rockies team that I don't think should have a 5.9 run implied total. I aggressively bet on this earlier today. This is a bad offense. I've got them at a 91 aggregate weighted runs created plus. Basically, I think the park slightly offsets this. I think Toussaint is basically an average pitcher. I don't know how, I have the Rockies implied run total personally a lot lower than this, which means I am dramatically lower on Colorado. I think they're the biggest negative leverage option. I haven't seen the top stacks tool, but I assume that's the case. Yeah. So does the top stacks tool. I would like to be underweight on Colorado, maybe a little bit of just individual bats popping up, but this is not a spot for me for Colorado because of the current ownership. Atlanta, I don't know what else to say. They're unquestionably the top stack today. It's not close. They're more than double any other team on this slate. Are they over-owned? Yeah, probably. But that's just going to happen if you're in 39% of lineups for a 5-game slate. I will unquestionably have some Braves 5-mans. I don't want to have a lot. They're going to make up the large majority of any 2-mans or one-offs that I have in everything else. I need the Braves to be good, not great today.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's the correct way to attack that ownership on this slate. They're clearly, like you said, the best offensive option here, the most likely stack to go off. I don't remember seeing a more likely stack in terms of our probability of success in the top stacks tool all season long than the Braves on this particular slate against this particular pitcher. I could be wrong about that. I might be forgetting one. I'm talking main slates, but that is one of the higher probabilities all season. And that's why the entire field's going to be there. So yeah, you're going down the path with at least, a third of the field on anyone in this lineup on the Braves side. It makes sense to be there. It's just a matter of what you're putting them with. So like we talked about up top, you just can't go to them with the absolute most popular pitching combinations. You can't go to them with the absolute cheapest and highest value stack where everybody's drawing that same ownership, drawing that same value. I'm thinking of teams like the Pirates and the Cubs. So this is a spot where maybe if you're trying to forcibly mash together like Braves and Red Sox, Braves and Rays, Braves and Indians, where you can pay for it, where you can make it make sense. And that's where some of the positioning becomes a little bit of a challenge as well. Yeah. I think that's the way to attack it. Try and get to those low-owned combinations. Short slate, I think you can attack a little bit more with some more oddball combinations. Normally I advocate going like full on, 4-man, 5-mans, 4-4s, 4-3s, things like that. I think you can get a little bit more oddball just given this slate, the heavy concentration of ownership in this game and around particular pitching spots, and start building with some of those other teams and spreading out to different spots where you're doing like a 3-3-2, something along those lines. I don't like getting to too many one-offs. Like I don't like going a 3-man and then 5 one-offs or like a 4-man and 4 one-offs. But if you're going to correlated hitters in groups that are just maybe smaller groups than normally I would advocate, I think that maybe makes a little bit of sense and makes it a little bit easier to utilize this Braves offense. The Rockies side of it, I agree with you. I just don't like going to bad teams when I can avoid it. And I think this is a bad baseball team. Against right-handed pitching, I mentioned it before, the home mark is much better because it's Coors Field, obviously. But just overall for the season, their active roster, one of the worst, actually the worst WRC plus collectively in baseball is them against right-handed pitching, 24% worse than average, 76 WRC plus. That's awful. So this is a bad baseball team for creating runs. They don't have a ton of power. It's easy to get to them. That said, you can also flip that script and justify getting to hitters like Ryan McMahon, Sam Hilliard with all their power on the back end of the lineup. They're good individuals. They just don't come together and form a good baseball lineup for whatever reason.
This is going to be a fascinating game, and it's the late night hammer too. I mean, it doesn't really matter what has happened up until like 8, probably like even like 9:15 tonight. Like if one of the teams breaks out early, you're still waiting to see if the Braves or the Rockies do it too, because then you're just getting a mishmash of those two things. It's going to be nuts. I'm avoiding it. I bet on the under. I'm pulling for the under. And I hope that comes largely based on the Rockies being trash.
Yeah, whatever happens in that game, and then the pitching in the Mets-Marlins game, or for me, like if Tristan McKenzie has a nice night, that'll be a major inflection point. But to me, the pitching in the Mets-Marlins and then just whatever happens in course are the two biggest inflection points of what's going to happen on this slate. Everything else would be an outlier situation. This is where all the ownership's going to be. It's going to swing so much early and then late. It's just going to be bookending the slate. So it's going to be really fun. And probably as I say that, something ridiculous will happen in the middle there to make a liar out of me. But hopefully that's Tristan McKenzie going off against the Royals.
Well, we've made it through all 5 games. We can probably go ahead and ask for a couple more thumbs ups before we get out of here and turn it over to the college football crew in 5 minutes. Let's take some questions if you want. What do you say?
Yeah,
dong picks. Almost forgot.
Oh, yeah. Mine every day. Everybody can find mine all season long in my free tournament strategy article. Today's was Mr. Franmil Reyes, a little bit popular, a little bit chalkier than I'd like to go, but just love the spot for him. And everybody around him in my model was either going against the pitcher that I like, in Tristan McKenzie, which is Sal Perez. He was number 4 after Franmil, who's number 3, or they were playing at Coors Field, and I don't like to pick Coors for this. So Franmil Reyes.
All right, let me see what I got. Top of the heap, no surprise, 5 straight Braves. I'm going to go to someone. Oh, you went Franmil Reyes? Okay.
I did.
He's my number 6, but the only guy, like, he's also the first guy that's under 10% owned.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go 2 more. I'm going to go to the same guy I took yesterday, Nelson Cruz. He is 8th for me, only 5% owned.
I like that a lot. He is 14 for me, and there might be 1 or 2 guys who were not in their lineup. So yeah, love that pick. One of my top guys.
Well,
Boston
now
guys
we
in
can
there.
Questions.
We talked about the Boston offense, and there's a couple guys that are popping with interesting home run marks on my board here that I really like getting to this Boston offense. A little Hunter Renfroe in there, a little Kyle Schwarber in there. Some of the not exactly the top end. Rafael Devers and JD Martinez are up there, but they're ranked behind those 2 guys. So I think it's an interesting spot for Boston.
Checking out Premium Slack. Doesn't appear that anybody's given us any questions. So I'm sure people are questioning why Sean V was in chat. Maybe those questions can happen from YouTube.
Are they still just talking about the MJ and LeBron debate and how Larry Bird?
Yeah, so I don't.
Larry
really
Bird apparently couldn't start for a baseball team.
I don't really know what that debate was.
It was somebody being just, I guess, wrong about the nature. Like it was basing the LeBron is better than MJ argument entirely around the idea that MJ was playing against significantly worse competition. And it was phrased as he was playing against plumbers and accountants, which it's just not true. I mean, we're talking about many of the best players of all time played in that era. It was a different era, a lot of defense, a lot of hand checking, a lot of 90-point games. But it's just different. Jordan, I put a stat in there at his peak in the year it was highest. Jordan averaged 3.8 3-point attempts per game in, I want to say, like 96, 97 at age 33. Just imagine that would be triple that in today's NBA.
He'd
and it would
be shooting
change the way you guard him. Easy. Yeah. And that would open up everything else for the best player ever at driving the lane and dunking the basket. It would be unstoppable. So it's a nonsense argument to me, but part of that became, Larry Bird played in that era. He couldn't even start for a team these days, let alone make the Hall of Fame, which I awarded one of the top 5 worst Slack takes of all time. That's up there.
I thought that one was a joke, which I actually laughed at.
I hope it was a joke. Let's put it that way. If it was sarcastic and it was a person I didn't know, so I usually don't give the benefit of the doubt there in Slack. But if it was a joke, congratulations, you got it past me. I hope it was, because God, that would be an awful take.
Sean V just said he's better. LeBron is better than MJ, and now I hate that that's my take as well. Ugh. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No, it's a hot dog. I mean, I understand the concept of the question. I think it's its own thing. I think a hot dog, just because it's in bread, doesn't make it a sandwich. I think especially if you're slicing the bread on top and putting something in between, and there's no top and bottom covering. I think a top and bottom covering defines a sandwich to me.
Okay. I'm indifferent to the hot dog as a sandwich debate.
As am I. I just made that up on the fly. If you ask me again a week from now when I completely forget that we had this conversation, I might answer the entire opposite way.
Well, on that note, shout out to Jock Market for being the presenting sponsor of this bad boy. You got to check them out. I just realized that I didn't talk about them, and I need to let you guys know that you should be playing at Jock Market. NBA, MLB, NHL, or PGA. You can buy and sell shares of these players during the game. You can do this all from the comfort of your couch. You can even short players now, which they recently released. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up and get up to a $50 deposit bonus. This offer is exclusive to the Awesemo community. Don't sleep on it. Shout out to Jock Market. You're going to be digging into Jock Market on Saturday, I believe, correct?
Yeah, me and Greg, we're going live half an hour early on the Live Before Lock baseball show to talk specifically Jock Market stuff. So everybody who's interested in that site, tune in. We're going to be going through the whole slate, talking about some of the pre-lock IPOs and all of those different things. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun to dig into.
Make sure you're checking that out, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Stick around, not on this link, but coming up on the channel, coming up on a channel, College Football Live Before Lock. Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.